Hello, welcome back to the Practical Microservices stream. Not a lot to announce today. Let's just jump straight into it. Meetup tomorrow evening, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. I still need to add the Zoom link to the description here, but I use a different computer to do that for reasons. So yeah, come to that. And let's just jump back into where we were. We were working on our register class. Oh, I really ought to do something else as well, which is to connect to Twitch so that I can see the chat. Come on, Ethan, up the Twitch game there. Okay, I can see the chat now. Great. All right. Yeah. So we were working on a test for our register class that will actually write the event. And this class is pretending to be something called by an HTTP handler, because we're going to say the application layer owns the event stream in question here. And we got to the point where we added a dependency on write, which is the same kind of write that we would have in one of our message handlers, and dependency is not defined. And I remember being surprised because the output wasn't read, which is what usually happens when you get an error when the test is running. But of course, we're hitting this problem before the test is running. It's when we go up this chain with the automated init requirement here, it's going to try to load in our classes that we have defined. And as it's defining this class, when it goes to call dependency here, it can't find dependency. So we need to get that included there. So it may be as simple as include dependency. I don't like to just try things until it works. Trying to like actually understand what's going on. Because once you understand what's going on, it's really easy to make the changes that you're after. I believe this is correct though, because this is the Eventide gem. It's not an Eventide gem. Let's look it up real quick. It's probably under the Eventide project. Yes, that doesn't make it an Eventide gem in the sense that this dependency gem would be useful in a Ruby program that was not components and messaging. It's just a great way to do dependency injection without all the complication of BI frameworks and inversion of control stuff, machinery, we could say. And so I believe we have access to that gem because somewhere along in our loader where we are loading in Eventide Postgres, I believe something in that chain pulls dependency into, requires it, makes it available. So we'll find out if that's the case. Seems to be, because the test ran. All right, cool. So now with our writer, we can put in that standard stuff that we have whenever we're checking to see if we wrote a particular event. So we could say that our registered is equal to writer.one message do, and usually call that event. And so what we would say is event.instance of, I believe that takes a question mark, messages, events, registered. Now that will fail. First, because messages, events is not a thing yet. We haven't written any code with that module chain before. Why did that pass? That was, oh, because we haven't written a message, right? Until we write a message, the block won't actually get evaluated. So, so what we would say is test registered event is written. And then we would refute that, not event, but that registered is nil. And it will be nil, so we'll fail that assertion on line 19. Sure enough. Okay, great. So now we need to get a message written over here, which would be as simple as write a registered event. However, we need a registered event for that to work. So we can say that is equal to, and now here's where in our, sorry, one second. We have a young baby at home who has not been sleeping well, and when young baby does not sleep well, Nobody sleeps well, but that is okay. It is part of the job. So let's see here. Right. In our message handlers, we would typically include messages, events, or messages commands if we needed them. Now we should get a failure because messages events is not a thing. Messages is not even a thing at this point. It's right, because we have no message classes in here. So let's add one. Registered.rb. We can then module register, module messages, module events. And then in there, we would do class registered. We want it to be an event, so we would include messaging message. And that should be enough for now. Oh, right. This won't syntactically pass right here. So then we would just say, hey, let's get a registered.build and then write it to some stream. Like so. And you know this is completely incorrect because I'm using the single quotes there, which I don't normally like to do. So that's just a signal that this code is wrong. Okay, so with that in place, then this still won't work because we haven't added the message class to our loader file. So let's do that real quick, which is as simple as removing that comment and then coming here and doing registered. Yeah, I believe running this now, we should have all green. That's what we got. Fantastic. Okay, won't need the loader. We will need the message definition still because we're about to add the actual attribute checks to it. And forgot something yesterday. We have this beautiful control available to us, but we are still using this right here. So let's fix that. So we would say, I think here we can just say controls. The reason that we had to do register on line 8 here was because the module and the class inside it have the same name. But controls don't. We are including register as part of our test init. So we should just be able to say controls email.example, and this should run. There we go. And I'll get rid of that comment. But now here's the thing. Subject under test is this register class. That's the most important thing. So we'll move its instantiation to the top, and then we will deal with the values here. So because we're getting this directly from a control and we're not like getting an example message, I'm not going to bother with the precondition here. Or should I? If that email is nil, test is invalid. So yeah, let's just email or fail. Put that in there because the test wouldn't work if that weren't the case. Okay, great. So what's next? Right, we want to make sure it was written to the correct stream. So we would say test registered is written to, it's our stream category here. Well, let's see what we have on the event model. We put identity, so we'll just call it that. And then we would say written to stream equals writer dot written, pass it our registered, do, that will give us our stream name. And then what we would want to say is that stream name is equal to identity dash. Now here's the fun part. What will go in the dash? We could say the email. Let's do it as a first pass because we want to address right to be forgotten concerns. And if the email addresses are actually part of the stream identity, then we will forever persist the email addresses, which isn't what we want to do. We just want to make sure we haven't used it before. And so what we'll probably end up doing is running a hash on the email address, maybe using a UUID v5 to do that. And so we wouldn't be able to retrieve what the actual email address was from the stream name, but we would be able to know if it had been used. And that will make sense when we get there. So we just want to assert then that it was written to the stream. This should fail. We should get an assertion failure on line 28 because we are currently writing it to some stream, which you can see over on line 15 here, and not identity followed by the email. So run that, and that's what we got. Cool. So now we just go back to the code and make that work. Get ourselves a little more space here. Our stream name is going to equal something. We could, of course, hard code that ourselves. Like so. Or we could use the bit from the framework here, which would be, I believe it's include messaging stream name. I think that's what it is. And if that's the case, then we can just say, oh, but we'd have to know what category we are. Now it just starts to look like a handler that isn't a handler. You know, maybe we don't include. No, we can't call the functions directly. I don't think so. Anyway, let's check something out here. Here is the Eventide source here. So messaging, and there is the stream name module right here that I was considering including. We could just directly call the method and pass in the category, which I'm kind of leaning towards here. Why not include it? Is there any harm in including it? No, not really. I'm just trying to avoid, for whatever reason, adding the category declaration over on our other class. So let's see what that would look like and why am I so worried about that? If we did it this way, in addition, probably move these up here just to keep some order there. We'd also have to declare category identity right there. Something wrong with that. That's fine. Let's just leave it then. So we'll go stream name, and then we would pass it the identifier in question, which would be our email that we're dealing with. And then instead of writing it to some stream, we would write it to stream name, like so. All right, I believe that should pass now. Why do I think that? Because we are building our registered event, and then we are constructing the stream name with the identity of category and passing to it email right here, which will put together the string that we're checking against in line 25 over on the right-hand side. Why, if it doesn't work, why I think it might not work is I might not remember correctly what are the things to include to make that work. Typically, I'm doing this in a handler, and so it's kind of interesting pulling in a lot of the same machinery on a class that isn't a handler class. And for my own organizational benefit, I'm going to put a blank space between gems that I'm including from the outside and pieces of our own project that are on the inside. So let's do that and go ahead and run the test here. It passed. Cool. Okay, sweet. So messaging stream name. Of course, having looked at the code, it's now jogging in my memory here. When you include messaging stream name and it gets included on your class, a couple of other things get included onto your class. One of them being messaging category, which is what makes available to us the category method macro here, whatever you want to call it. like it's a macro in function, but mechanically it's a method call, because that's what Ruby does. When you're defining a class, it actually goes line by line, executing what's there. I am not saying that's good or bad. It's just different than a lot of other languages, and I find it very interesting. All right, so now we've got the message. It's being written to the correct stream. So now we want to make sure we're getting the right attributes. Attributes. Do. So we'd have a test here for the email. And then we would just want to say that assert registered.email is equal to our email thing from above. And I didn't pull that email into existence. I typed that beforehand. So normally I would like to get an error from this thing on the right-hand side not being defined. But I had already typed that as I was sketching out the test earlier. So be it. Registered.email is not a valid thing. So when we run this, we would expect to see no method email on the registered instance there. And that is indeed what we got. So we can come up here to our event class and say attribute, a method that we have available to us from having included messaging message. And we put email, and that's probably going to be a string. And we don't. That needs to be a symbol. Might work as a string. Let's see if it does. So first of all, now we should get an assertion error on line 33 because nil doesn't equal our email address. Okay. So all we would need to do there is say that registered.email is equal to email, and now the test should pass. Great. Okay, now I'm totally curious. Could this have been a string? It could have. Okay, so you could do a string or a symbol when you call attribute there. I'm going to leave it as a string. A symbol, because that's what I've seen in more examples, and I would like to follow that convention. Are there other reasons to do it that way? I can't think of any. I'm going to follow the convention. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a passing test. We are writing the event. We are putting the correct data in there. That's great. Now comes the other test that we need to write. And that is, so the way that we're actually going to make sure that we haven't registered with this email address before is we are going to take advantage of the optimistic concurrency that Eventide or MessageDB has for us, and Eventide too, because we're not directly calling MessageDB in this code right here. And so if you think about it, I'm going to try my best to do a visual. Well, we can just do it on the event model screen here. So let's pretend that we had some particular identity, and Ethan at such software.com was the email address in question that we care about. So I'm going to scroll this down so that we don't think that that up there has anything to do with what we're looking at. So this is the stream, right? So remember from our requirements that we listed out yesterday that, oh yeah, here's my draft of my email I sent out today. Let's go get, not that one, this one. Okay, here we go. So yesterday we were saying that unique email addresses for people registering, and people can't change email addresses. So once someone has registered with a particular email address, even if it were a mistake, whatever, that one's just now consumed for the duration of this system. In the meetup, we're going to say, well, what if that weren't the case? How would we deal with that and design through it? But for where we are right now, we're just saying that once someone types in an email address and submits it, that one is consumed. Tough luck. Possibly a useful increment on the way to delivering an actual product. But for our purposes, for the meetup, we're just trying to show the optimistic concurrency functionality that MessageDB provides. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, don't take this code and run it in production. This is technical capabilities that we're looking at, and that's all. So with that said, then, we were looking at the diagram. Yes. So this is the stream, and you can see all of the messages that are in it, which are none, right? This this is like an interesting thing to me with MessageDB versus something like Kafka. Let me grab over here and then sure MessageDB is easy to get to here in my history. Maybe I'll bump that up in size because I can't even see it on my, in OBS. I'm looking at OBS and can't read what it's saying. Anyway, okay, so this is the table backing MessageDB. This is where all the data is stored in this table. And it has a stream name column. And so if you're used to something like Kafka that has topics, you've operated it before, you know that those topics there's ceremony involved in making a new one. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. It's just, it's an operations concern making a new Kafka topic. You have to like do something to your Kafka instance to put it there, provision the topic, however, whatever the terminology is. I've not operated Kafka before. And so the idea of just making a new stream might seem laborious, but in MessageDB, there is no ceremony to creating a new stream. Once a message is written with a value in the stream name column that hasn't been written before, that's when the stream is created. I use the created verb there because we're talking about a mechanical thing, so I think that's all right. So you don't have to like go into an admin portal or type in some Terraform to make a stream in MessageDB. You just write a message with a stream name that hasn't been seen before, which means that this is kind of nonsensical, right? A stream doesn't exist in MessageDB until there is a message written with that stream name. So it's not like you could go to MessageDB and see an empty stream, because you can't. If you search for messages where stream name is equal to something and you find no results, that would indicate that no stream is there. So conceptually, we can think about an empty stream, but they don't actually exist in MessageDB. Like everything's an empty stream because, yeah, it can simultaneously hold the entire infinite set of empty streams. So that's pretty impressive technology. That's a silly way to phrase it. But all right, so point is, in our model, the first event that gets written to a stream is this registered event. That is the point at which that particular stream now has something in it, comes into existence, etc. So if you try to write an event to the stream, but there's already an event, that would mean this identity is already consumed. You can't have it. And the way that we accomplish that is with if we go back to MessageDB, we'll just walk up the chain and start with MessageDB here. Let's see, I want the functions and the write function in particular here. So parameter list when you're calling MessageDB. If you're using Eventide, this is all mapped out in very predictable ways already. If you are writing your own client that talks to MessageDB, well, here's something very important to be aware of. So this is the stored function, I believe is the terminology. I hate that word because the ology in there says study of something to me. So the vocabulary used in Postgres, I believe we call these stored functions. And here is its parameter list. And you'll notice that one of them is expected version. So you can call this function with an expected version. And falling through here, it calculates the current version of the stream. But if you send in a write with an expected version and the current stream version does not match what you passed in, well, then you get an exception. So the way that you could know if an email address has already been used is to attempt to write a registered message to a stream with an expected version that would signal the start of the stream. 1 second, I'm going to run off camera for 2 seconds. My nose was a little irritated. Tissues were over there, and I don't think anyone needed to see that. So that's why I ran off camera. Anyway, I'm back. Right. So we would try to write our registered event and just send an expected version that would signal, I am expecting this to be an empty stream. So we can look at the code here and know what that value would be. So if stream version is null, then we're going to set it to a default of -1. That would be the expected version you would want to pass if you want to write this and expect that there is nothing in there. So then what would happen is your expected version of -1 would be compared with the stream version of -1 that is calculated here. And stream version would be null because only if this function doesn't find any messages written for that stream. So we go back up to our code. We haven't written the test yet. We're going to do that, but there's a couple ways to do this. One is you could say pass expected version -1. Perfectly valid to do. However, Eventide makes that a little more ergonomic. You can say write.initial. That's actually the code that we're going to add to make our test pass. We don't have the test yet. Just thought it would be worthwhile to talk through all of that. But we can look at the write message here, write method rather. And what you can see is that this is the write.initial that we would be calling. This is in the messaging gem. Of course, we use the messaging Postgres gem, but messaging Postgres just includes messaging. So this is the method that we'd be calling. And it's just defined as calling the regular write message and passing in an expected version of no stream, which will translate into a -1. I'm not sure at what level of the stack that happens there. So let's see if we can find it. That actual write may come from oh, right. Call is aliased to it. So where is no stream defined? That might be lower in the stack. Well, clearly it is because it's not in this file. So let's see. Let's go to Eventide and let's grep for no stream. I'm just curious. Wow, a lot of hits there. So let's see, where would that be? Oh, there is an actual no stream file in message store lib message store no stream. Let's go have a look at that one. Message store lib message store. Oh, it's highlighted right there. Helpful. Okay, so message store no stream, self.name is no stream. That's not quite what I was, I guess. Let's look at the message store right here. Is there any talk of no stream in here? There is not. Where does that get converted into the -1? I'm so curious about this. All right, I'm going to time box this. If I haven't figured this out by 12:33, let's say. So I've got 3.5 minutes to figure this out. If I don't, table it, do it some other time. But where does no streams right there? So def call, and this is the actually when we call write, we're actually calling this call. It was aliased. So expected version nil. Okay, so batch is an array. That's where we deal with it being a batch or not. Get the message data. We call the message writer, and we pass through the expected version. So the message writer in this case would be the actual thing that writes the messages. So we would find that for us in messaging Postgres, right? I believe. Oh no, the message writer is a message store Postgres write. So let's go to message store Postgres write. Here we go. So this is our next step down. We received the expected version. Aha, unless it's nil, we're going to canonize it. So this is where this would happen. So we're passing in the symbol no stream right there. Let's capitalize this correctly. Is that defined anywhere else? That is not defined in message store Postgres. So maybe that's in message store. It's not in get, read controls, expected version. Here we go. Canonize, return nil if it's nil. Return expected version unless expected version is equal to nostream.name, nostream.version if that's the case. Okay, so that is how the symbol nostream gets turned into the -1 value. In the call chain, when we get down to the message store writer, which is the lower level one that deals with message data rather than instances of messages, we're just checking to see if the expected versions, if it matches this special version symbol. So that one would actually have to be a symbol and not the string in that case. And if that's the case, then we return what that defined version is. And no stream is defined right here. Okay, neat. Today I learned. So hopefully that was interesting how that works. Anyway, write initial is just syntactic sugar over doing either expected version -1 if you really want to know the low level details, or if you just want to think in concepts, you can pass in the symbol no stream. In either case, we have not written the test yet, so we're not going to write that code. All right, so I don't think we even have a Git repo yet. Great. Since we use the generator, I believe we get a git ignore. We do. Okay, so let's add everything. Check out the git status here. Register component gem spec. That file is named incorrectly given what we are. I'm just going to remove that. Let's not deal with it. That would get us lost too much. We will need the settings to be able to run the scripts that we want to run. Those files all look correct to me though. So we will go ahead and git commit. Usually like to do a first one that's like, this is the initial commit, but what did we do? Register happy path. Let's see, register works is such a generic term, but registration with unused email address works. Or oh my goodness. Learn to type adds registration with unused email addresses. Cool. I'll fiddle with GitLab and GitLab. Oh, cool. Yeah. Because it's so prone. It's so easy in, sorry, this, I post archives of all the streams on YouTube. So I'm going to restate what you said there. So you never heard of time boxing. So you just looked it up. Seems useful. Yeah. It's so easy in programming to get lost down rabbit holes. And so sometimes you need to do it because like we really cannot proceed unless we know this thing, but understanding how that no stream thing operates, you don't really need to understand that to successfully use the library. So, but I wanted to, but I also didn't want it to take the whole stream. So I don't know. It's a nice contractual agreement with oneself or one's team. Okay, cool. And welcome to the stream, by the way, MF Drabala. Let's see, where were we going? Okay, so we just committed that. So I want to get another test that makes sure that we are doing the expected version bit properly. And so there's a question in my mind. So this is really important to note here. Let me pull up the register class again. We called this write method here. We did not actually write to a message store. This dependency macro that we have right here, we pass it this symbol write, which is what made write available to us right here. And then we passed it this class here, this messaging Postgres write class. I don't know your experience with Ruby, but you asked me about Rails yesterday, so you may already be familiar with the general Ruby syntax, but just in case someone's watching who isn't familiar with it, a class in Ruby is itself an instance of type class. It's a thing that can be put into a variable. It could be passed as an argument. So when we call dependency, passing it the symbol write and the symbol of messaging Postgres write, what we're saying is we are going to have a stateful dependency on this class that we want to access through the name write, which is what we do at line 21, but it needs to conform to this interface. You can do dependency just like that. And what will happen is underneath all the hood, there is a mimic library in Eventide. Let me pull that up. Eventide project. If you search Eventide without the project bit, there are a lot of hits that have nothing to do with the Eventide project, let's say. So there is this concept in OO, the null object pattern, and a null object is an object that you can call a method on, and it just returns null or nil, whatever your language chooses to call no value. So that's a useful object to have in place, like where your class performs some side effect through some other object, and you want to just test the logic of your class, but you don't want the side effect to happen. A null object can be very helpful for that. And that's what this mimic gem is providing. But mimic goes one step further in that, well, I would say 2 steps further, actually. Mimic goes one step further. So you can pass it a particular class, and a normal, is normal the right word? A null object would typically return null no matter what method you call on it. So you could call methods that don't exist and it will just return null. Mimic, when you tell it some other class whose interface you want to mimic, will actually give you a no method error if you call a method that doesn't exist on the thing that you're mimicking. And so that's very useful, because in this code here, if we just had a standard null object, then I could have been like, let's see, dependency write who, which doesn't exist. And it would have been like, yeah, cool, that works for me. That's fine. But we want to make sure we're calling methods that actually exist on the thing that we're mimicking. So then the part that what I started saying when I said mimic takes it one step further, it's actually in dependency. If the class that you are passing here defines a substitute name or module within it, and we can look at that real quick over here in, and by substitute I literally mean the word substitute. So I believe that is in messaging write substitute. Here we go. So the messaging write module gets included into the messaging Postgres write class. So this code that we're looking at here is part of the messaging Postgres write, going back to our code that we passed in right here. So it's on there. When you try to access the dependency and it sees like, oh, you have an actual interface for this. Oh, and that interface interface. We don't literally have things called interfaces in Ruby, but the thing that you pass to me has within it a module called substitute. Well, instead of building a mimic object, I'm going to build an instance of your substitute here. So you have to have the module substitute as well as a build method directly on the module. And so it will call that instead of just doing a mimic object. This write substitute in turn has a bunch of telemetry not a bunch of. It is instrumented with the telemetry concept that Eventide also has a gem for. Let me pull that one up real quick. Eventide project telemetry. Fantastic classes or gem as well that we dove into for some earlier work in porting the books code. But basically what it does is it gives you a way to trap things that have been done to this instance. So methods that were called on it with their parameters and all of that. Something that is often done with spies, which are things of test, like they're used in one-off test scenarios. So you having a substitute with this telemetry being captured is very useful in a test scenario. It's also useful in an operational scenario. So if you just wanted to like log certain things, what telemetry here allows you to do is separate the capturing of what happened from what you want to do about it. And so we use that. I say we as if I wrote any of the Eventide framework. This messaging write substitute makes use of telemetry that's on messaging write to provide us helper methods for writing our tests. So let me go back to our code real quick and our test in particular. This writer here that we got from register write is an instance of the substitute that is defined by messaging write that we were just looking at. And so when we call right here, the write.call, and we pass in the event that we want to write and the stream name that it's written to, that gets captured in the telemetry of our messaging writer instance. And then we have these methods to help us interact with that history that we captured. So we say, hey, writer, was there one message written to you that passes this block? So event.instance of messages events registered. If more than one message had been written of that type, we would get an error, possibly 0. I don't recall. And this rabbit hole has gone deep enough. So anyway, yeah, the point is thus far, we have not actually written to MessageDB. And the way that I will demonstrate that is to run MessageDB and try to connect to it. Well, we'll successfully connect to it. rm-sf and docker compose. Oh my goodness. Compose up like so. Cool, I didn't have one running. So let me pull up table plus here and close this and then open our MessageDB local. If we go to the messages table, there are no messages there because we were just using the substitute and it was capturing that, and that was great. So why all of that mattered? For what we want to do, now we want to see is that when we write a message and there's already a message in there, we want to make sure that we get an error from that. And what that is testing is that we've written this call correctly. This call, as it's written right now, will allow you to just keep using the same email address over and over again. I know it's wrong and I know exactly how to fix it, but I want a test that proves that we've done it right. And we may not be able to do that without actually writing to MessageDB. We may have to involve the database. I hope we don't, because it just slows it down. And we have these whole 2 tests, and we couldn't possibly bear with the nanoseconds of extra time that will take. I go into this in this depth because I want to understand it at a deeper level. So anyway, so this is the messaging write substitute. So this is the thing that we can set into a different state. So like you can call raise expected version error here. That tells you whether or not it will, but there is something you can call to set it into a state that it will throw an error. So that's what it is. You would call this. And that will just raise the expected version on the next call no matter what, which isn't what we want, because if we set it into this mode that it's going to raise that error no matter what, and then we just call it without the expected version, we'll get the error and then we'll be like, oh, we did it correctly, so we're all good. This mode would be more useful if you're trying to test how your thing reacts to this error. But we want to test that we will get this error in the correct circumstance. So I think we actually have to go to the database to make this work. And that we can do that. And I think there is an example of it already in the account component. So where would that be? It's not these expected version ones, I don't think, right? These are just checking to see that we wrote with the correct expected version. But somewhere in here, there is a test to make sure that, here we go, it's these. So, yeah, you can see here, this is actually doing the writes to the database and stuff. So I think it's this not reserved one that I'm interested in. So let's see, we get a deposit ID and an example deposit command. We get the transaction stream name that we'd expect, and we write the message to there. And then we call the handler, and then we try to retrieve the message and we find that it isn't there. Now, why did that work? There's no check here for an error being thrown. And the reason for that is in the handler. So if we open that, let's see, we're handle commands, handlers commands, deposit. It is wrapped with something that is expecting the expected version error. So we're anticipating that error. And so we catch it, we just move on if that's what we got. So all we would need to do is, our code won't have a try catch, begin rescue is what we call it in Ruby. This is another gem from the Eventide project here. Anyway, we'll go to actually write it. So our test flow is probably going to look like construct a registered event, write it to the database at a particular stream name that we care about, or the stream name that the class would write it at. And then we will try to write the message again and notice that we get the expected version error. That's the flow. So to make that a little smoother, I am going to grab this code and bring it over here. And let's see here. So registered MC, not registered, or email address already used. What to name this class? What are we testing? Email not available. Let's go with that. Email not available. Whoa, that's not what I meant to do. Let me just reopen. If you press up, if you press the U key on the keyboard over here in nerd tree, it navigates you one level higher in the directory. And I thought I was in a code file, and I wasn't, and that U would have been a useful thing to press. Okay, so I copied that. This is the old file. And what do I? Let's just get rid of everything here. And then I can just put what was in the other file there. All right, so let's stick with automated init, and we are still in the context for register. And let's see, what time is it? 12:50. I just got a notification for a work meeting at 1. So may need to end the stream just a few minutes early today, but we still got a little time. So it was register, and it's still, do not remember what I put here. Registered, there we go. So email not available. So it's already been used. And we can get rid of that level and that level. Pull this in. Now let's go through these lines and see which of them make sense. We will need this concept here. So that would be email controls. Oh, right. So here's the tricky part. Let me just type out what I was going to type out. Dot example. All right. So, thanks for coming today. Good to see you. Like sometimes though, like, are you a programmer yourself, and what technologies do you work with? I'm curious about. But yeah, have a good one if you need to drop right now. Otherwise, yeah, those questions to you. And I will look up at the chat bar. I wear this hat, and when my head is down looking at this screen, I sometimes miss it. Anyway. Okay, so let's see, got about 4 minutes. If with the message store, we don't typically delete messages from it, even though this is local development. And so we have to actually write a message there. And if we keep always using the same email address, then we'll get that expected version error immediately before we've even had a chance to do our test. But maybe that's not an issue. Maybe we could just, like, we only need to put it there if it's not there. So we could just put a begin, rescue, end around it. In fact, we could just take the try from the other thing, although I don't want to import that entire gem just for that. So no, we can stick with the email address as it is there. And that is effectively our identifier. So then this is where we get a control command, but that's not what we're not dealing with a message right now. So we can get the actual class that we're working with, which is right here. We'll need that. All right, we've got to actually call this thing. All right, this is a little more complicated because if we do that, that's the thing that's worth pointing out here. All that dependency stuff that you saw gets set in place when you instantiate or initialize the object, which is what happens when you call new. There's typically then in an operational scenario at some point you wouldn't call new on it. You would do something register. The convention that has emerged is to, oh my goodness, if I could type, this would go anyway, to call a build method on there, which would return, it's a factory method that returns you a fully operational version of the dependency. And that's what we need to deal with. And then sometimes, and you need an equals here if you want valid syntax, that can even be made simpler. But because if you're just going to build one and then call it with some email, well, we can make that even nicer to work with. And so we would just call a class method called call, which would build one and then invoke it. So that doesn't even make sense there. This line right here will make sense, but we're going to go ahead and delete it. We do not need an example message, but we do need to know the stream name that this is all going to. And so that would be identity email, like so. And this we actually need. So this is where we would put our begin, rescue. I think you can, this is not the right class. Rescue a particular thing like so. And then we just won't do anything with that. Yeah. All right. Oh, not in the tech industry. Oh, regulatory side, natural gas. That's cool. Started going through the Odin project to learn HTML, CSS, JS, and Ruby. Also trying to help contribute to an open source project that uses a lot of Python, so I'm all over the place. Python's a great language to get started with as well, especially if data science interests you at all. It has become the de facto standard for it. So, yeah, cool. No, it's a great path to go down. Like, I enjoy writing code a lot. So, I mean, you don't need rando on the internet approving of your choices. So I don't mean it that way. But cool. Yeah. I mean, feel free. Like I talk about this microservices stuff, but if you ever show up and you have questions about other things, feel free to ask. It's really not like a real set agenda. This is just what we've got to get through kind of a thing on the stream here. I just am hanging out, working on stuff. And if people want to show up and chat, we do that. So good luck in your studies. I'm going to end it here so that I have some time to take notes. Hopefully won't be doing any more of this on stream tomorrow because the actual meetup is tomorrow night and I would like to not be doing everything last minute. But anyway, hey, thanks for stopping by again. Have a lovely day. And to anyone else who was here, hope you have a lovely day. Catch you next time and happy coding.